Welcome to Real Possibilities with AARP. Hi, I'm Elaine Werner, your host. I am the Senior Program Specialist for Public Outreach and Volunteer Engagement on staff with AARP. Real Possibilities. AARP wants to make sure that no one's possibilities are ever limited as they age. And our purpose is to empower you with choice as you age. So keeping both of those things in mind, we come to you in your local community with resources and tools, hopefully that are good takeaways for you, that you can do just that, empower you to make choices, healthy choices, quality choices, choices with dignity as you age. Now, you may have some preconceived notions as to what AARP stands for, what AARP does. But the title of the show today is AARP Connecticut Behind the Scenes and how we show up locally in your community. I think you're going to be very surprised by what you'll find out in our program today. And no better guest to elaborate on that than our very own State Director, Nora Duncan. Welcome, Nora.
Thank you, Elaine.
Delighted to have you here. And Nora, I know you are out and about all over the state talking to our members, our non-members, on a myriad of issues. But if you could address, I'm sure when you're out and about, you do hear about some preconceived notions or definitions of AARP that maybe match sometimes what we are and maybe not. So if you can address that and then briefly define what AARP Connecticut is, and then as the show evolves, we'll get into some more of the details of all the programs we do locally.
Okay, great. So what we are is a nonprofit, nonpartisan, social mission organization with a membership. And now that sounds like a mouthful, and it is, but it actually really does mean something, both in terms of what we do every day and the IRS. So it's actually a dual purpose. We have about 600,000 members here in Connecticut, and there are about 38 million members nationwide.
Wow. Yeah.
As you know, and hopefully our audience is starting to know, that membership for AARP begins at age 50. That's when eligibility starts. But if you're 50 and you have a spouse or a domestic partner who is 45, they actually get to be a member too. It's a 2-for-1 deal, as we like to say. Household membership, really. You're not for the kids and everybody, but you know.
Yeah, exactly.
So with that, what we aren't is a insurance company. We have an entirely different part of the organization that manages all of those, let's call them discounts and partnerships that you see out in the community with our, with restaurants, with insurance companies, with the like, with travel. That's entirely managed elsewhere. What we do in the states and what happens in all 50 states plus the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and DC is really manage the activities with membership that show up in your community and non-members alike, like we talked about, both from an educational and outreach perspective and then also from advocacy perspective. So we have in our state, we're at the state capitol working with the Connecticut General Assembly, the governor's office, other constitutional officers, depending on what the topic is. And so it's really that sort of mix. Advocacy, education, and outreach, and then a whole bunch, a myriad, as you said, of different ways that we show up with that in community. We're not, we try to keep things fresh and keep things fun. So, and we can talk more about that.
We're going to talk about fun.
Yeah.
Have some serious issues sometimes we deal with, but we want to have fun as well. So I'm going to emphasize that Nora is the state director for the nonprofit side of AARP, and when we talk about AARP endorsing insurance and national discounts, that is on our for-profit side. But we also, and hopefully we won't neglect to cover in our show today, that we also have some terrific local discounts. Nora, speaking of local, here we are locally in your community. How does one find us locally first? And then let's talk about some of the programs that we offer, but where do they go to find us?
So there's a couple of ways, and you did say this is behind the scenes, so I can explain some of this in detail. So the couple of the things that are the easiest to do and the most likely to get you the most information about where we are our Facebook and Twitter handles. So those are both AARP CT. And we'll tell you what's going on, all the time, both from a national perspective, some of our national things that we do push down when we want you to contact your congressman or your U.S. senator, for instance. It'll tell you about the events we have, when we're doing events all across the state, the ones that are open to the public, and the that's sort of the goings on, just
Right.
the keeping up with the news of AARP. Then there's our website, which is aarp.org/CT.
Right.
And there you'll find a place where you can see some of our events and also sign up for emails. And that email sign up is really important because, from a behind the scenes perspective, sometimes I have an event that I send a postcard for. Right. But postcards are really expensive, right? And to get the number of them out there to fill a room has a lot more cost than email does. So by signing up for the email, you're liable to get a lot more invitations about where we are because that's no expense to me. Now, we also have some rules. We don't email anybody more than once a week. And there's different parts of the organization that might email. But all I'll say is don't say unsubscribe because one unsubscribes you from all. So you may not get the email about some kind of national advocacy anymore, but you're also not going to get the email about the day at the winery.
So signing up by the email is not necessarily going to give you thousands of emails. No. It's going to target your interests, your community, and things that you might not find out about otherwise, correct?
When you go to register for an email, there's check boxes.
Yeah.
You can say, I want to learn about this, this, and this, but you ignore the other ones. So there are opportunities to filter, to self-filter, and then I always say the power of delete is really,
there
you don't want to read it, don't read it.
You have that option.
But
we don't want you to miss anything at AARP.
I don't.
So Nora, all right, so that's how one finds us.
Yep, that's really that's the most efficient way. The social media, which is super important, like our pages, follow us, and share, and the email. Those
and
are
there's,
the most efficient.
I know of late, AARP Connecticut's showing more video on social media also, so watch it. You might, again, learn something new behind the scenes, right?
Yep, and the video will often be a snippet of something that we can then deeper dive elsewhere if you choose to go deeper dive. So, for instance, on an advocacy issue, we might say, we've discussed the budget or this bill, and you can go here to learn more. So if you don't want to go to learn more, you don't have to. But if it's something you've decided you're interested in, you can go learn more. There's often even another step that you can take. So we try to not bombard people with everything, but let them self-select what they're interested in. Now, you may be interested in a program about job seekers and not be interested in a program about caregivers. Your choice, you decide when you're there.
Good, I like that. I like that term, self-select. So we know how to get there. So what will our viewer find, Nora, locally in their community? And I'm going to lead you into one program I know is really important and really exciting, and people are drawn to it in very big numbers, and that's our Fraud Watch Network.
Okay. So yes, I talked a little bit about fun with purpose, right?
Yeah.
So the purpose of AARP Fraud Watch Network is to help people learn how to prevent frauds and scams in their life. We all know that we're one click away. Oftentimes we're a phone call away or a door knock away. It's easy to read about all the kinds of scams that are happening, but people still do fall victim. And what we are able to do is through a group of extraordinarily well-trained AARP Connecticut volunteers, go out in partnership many times with other experts in the community. Like the chief of police, the Department of Banking, the Department of Consumer Protections, the U.S. Postal Service inspector. They actually have a law enforcement division of the U.S. Postal Service because over the life of the Postal Service, which is longer than the life of us as a country officially, I think, the mail has been used to defraud people. We have relationships with the Secret Service, with the state police, with the chief's attorney's office. The list goes on and on. But those are folks with a very different perspective on fraud than we have that we can help bring in and educate the community. How we end up in those community offerings is almost always by invite from someone in the community who has heard about us, has seen a fraud or a scam happen, wants to help prevent it in the future. Sometimes our legislators will host a symposium. They do the inviting. So like the legislator in a certain town may say, I saw an uptick in door-to-door scam, or I saw the grandparents in my district. So let me ask the chief of police, let me ask AARP, let me ask the local whoever. And we can help introduce them to folks they can bring in as well. So that's one kind of thing. And that happens all over the state all the time. Now, some of our things are really invite only because you're not going to see everything we're doing every day by going to our social media or our website, because oftentimes we're invited into closed door groups, right? So there may be, maybe it's this is a good example, maybe it's a community, a retirement community of some kind, a 55 and up community, and they have their own set of programming that they only really offer to their residents. So you're not going to see that, but if we're organizing our own thing, or you might see it, the library has invited us in and they publicize these things all over the place. It's also just, sometimes you can just call us too.
And speaking of that, I want to give my, again, I'm Elaine Warner, I'm on staff. Nora Duncan is our statewide director. As you're listening to this show, if you're jotting down questions, always call me directly. My number is 860-548-3169. I focus on volunteer engagement. We'll talk about that. I can certainly let you know how that process works as well. Nora, you just spoke about our Fraud Watch Network, another area that has drawn a lot of excitement, attention, information, resources, caregiving.
Yes.
Whatever age we are, what do we say? If we're not already a caregiver, many of us are living longer, that we likely will be in need of caregiving. So
if you're not
that's
a
big
caregiver,
issue, right?
If you're not a caregiver now, you probably will be later, and if you're not a caregiver ever, you're probably going to need a caregiver.
Exactly.
And this is really our focus is on the unpaid family caregiver. So maybe for a parent or a spouse as they age, and sometimes we also have a lot of issues with disease that takes over and takes a long time to live through until it progresses to a stage where someone's either passed away or they maybe need to go into a different sort of setting. But the unpaid family caregiver, of which there are nearly 500,000 of in Connecticut in a given
huge
year,
cost also.
are keeping people at home and allowing them to age independently. So as independently as you can, right? But not having to go into a much more costly level of care that is institutionalized. Sometimes the unpaid family caregiver can supplement with some in-home professional care, but there's a lot of different situations and a lot of different obstacles, challenges, and difficulties in navigation that can occur. And so what we have designed is a program that can help people navigate that caregiving.
Resources.
Yes, the resources.
Okay, here's a crisis, what do I do?
Yeah,
right?
I mean, the worst, I think we can all focus on how this works for people, right? So you're either, you could be me, you're not caring for anyone, and then I get a phone call from the hospital.
Right.
And now I've got somebody.
I've had that happen in my own family.
I've had someone who's had a stroke now.
Yep. And what about long distance too? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we've got, then we also have the stuff, where and it's years and years, like Alzheimer's or something else. So everyone's got a unique and different story to tell, but the commonalities among what I hear from caregivers are extraordinarily similar. And there's just there's a lot of difficulty. It's a very stressful
Yes.
thing for some people, and so it's nice to be able to sort of gather with a group that has similar concerns. We have a group we work with that sometimes has these caregiver events in restaurants with a glass of wine.
Yep.
So
Yep.
we're
gonna
giving
talk
them
about fun with purpose,
we're giving
yes.
the caregiver a little bit of a break
Yes.
for those 90 minutes while
Yes.
they learn something.
Yes.
And we try to make sure that a difficult and complicated and important issue doesn't have to be like feel so bad when you go and learn about it. And you mentioned long distance caregiving. Something that might be of interest to folks is that we have coordinated with our colleagues in Puerto Rico.
Yes.
Now, we did that collaboration before Puerto Rico was hit with terrible hurricane. But even before that hurricane, it was a difficult caregiving situation for people to manage. Puerto Rico is not like here in that respect. So the ability for us to help Puerto Ricans who are living in Connecticut and who may have family who are in Puerto Rico was a really unique opportunity for us to brand a document that we knew was totally credible and could be taken directly home online or in the paper that we produced, so that folks could have a little bit easier of a time navigating a system that's was either more complicated than ours here or in some cases non-existent.
And on that note, Nora, it's, these are 2 resource guides. Again, I'm going to give you my number and my email if you want them. But we have the Connecticut Resource Guide for Caregiving. We have one for Puerto Rico. They are both in English and Spanish. And again, I'm Elaine Werner. I'm on staff with AARP, 860-548-3169, or email Werner, W-E-R-N-E-R, at aarp.org. We're talking about behind the scenes at AARP. We talked about the Fraud Watch Network and caregiving. Another one, Nora, that I know, being on staff, is very popular and of great concern are consumer issues, and I'm going to go right to the high cost of utilities in our very own state.
Yeah, the amount of things we work on sometimes is a little mind-boggling, but one of, there's also oftentimes a theme, and it's pocketbook. So with fraud, a lot of this is pocketbook, right? Because, your hard-earned money, we want to keep it in your pocket.
And we're living longer. We're
living longer
money to keep us going as we retire.
We do work in jobs because people are living longer and are working
Financial security.
Yeah, there's all sorts of things that we work on, but the pocketbook being a big focus. And trying to make sure that we have, to say affordable utility rates in Connecticut, I realize is the kind of thing that will set people off because we are the most expensive state in the continental United States for electric rates.
Yes, we have that unfortunate distinction.
Yeah, and I think deregulation actually made us more expensive, not less expensive. In that space, we have done a lot around consumer protections because people might recall, going back several years, we had a period of cold, Arctic freeze basically at a time where there was extraordinarily high natural gas prices, which left people with bills that were really just quadruple what they were expecting. And a lot of this was because they were in the third-party electric market, which is, was at that point in time had a decent amount of bad players. We have worked every year. Sometimes I feel like it's whack-a-mole because you create a rule or a law or a regulation, and then the bad players, not all of which are, but the bad players, figure out a way to find a new way for that mole to pop up, right? But trying to make sure the consumer protections are there so that people aren't getting scammed. For instance, if you ever spent a weekday sitting at home 5, 6, 7 years ago, the door knocking is really surprising.
Yes.
And people would go door to door, imitating and often leading you to believe that they were from your actual, in this case, Eversource or United Illuminating.
But they weren't from that.
They weren't.
Yes.
And so we've got those people, now they have to wear badges, there's more rules. A lot of the bad players left because if you can't scam people, there's no money in it. There was a lot of things like tickler rates that if you didn't read the fine print, you realized that you were paying quadruple what you should have to be paying if you had stuck with the standard offer. So we've worked a lot on, we also work on rate cases. And then we've worked on other related items. I mean, we're fuel neutral at AARP, so I don't care if it's green energy, if it's nuclear energy, if it's natural gas. I don't care. What I care about is trying to make sure the consumer is protected and that the unfair burden doesn't fall on those who can afford it the least. So I'm the chair of the Low Income Energy Advisory Board for the state of Connecticut.
Great to know you're doing that.
Which is statutory. And so I'm working with a bunch of people to try to make sure that programs really are there for people who really can't afford them and that ratepayers aren't picking up bills for things that they shouldn't have to be picking them up for.
And Nora, of course, this can all sound very confusing to people. Thank
it
you
is.
for
It
clarifying
is, yes.
so much of it. But AARP does have a program that we are taking out into the community where we can just sort of get through the cobwebs of looking at your bill, trying to figure out what a deregulated market looks like, what you should be looking for as far as changing your plans, et cetera. And again, we can tell you more about that. You can email me, ewerner@aarp.org, and be happy to elaborate. Nora, one program that I am personally very excited about, I'm a baby boomer, as you know. I proudly say that. And, we did things differently in our generation. Not that all haven't, but we have some distinctions that people know about. So we are aging differently. And there is something that we're calling a movement, and it's called Disrupt Aging.
Yes.
So if you could briefly touch, what is this movement that's happening that's caught on fire at AARP?
Well, Disrupt Aging started with our CEO, Joanne Jenkins. She published a book with the title Disrupt Aging. And each state has had an opportunity to take that and run with it in their own unique way. Not every state has, but I think we have a distinction in Connecticut of really going deep on Disrupt Aging in collaboration with an organization basically made up of a gerontologist and a communications professional, a television producer, who called Borrow My Glasses. Then we collaborate with, and we created, along with our volunteers, a program that sort of hits three segments. It hits community groups, and that was our first segment. And we did a lot of pre and post testing with AARP's research department to see if we could change the way people think about and feel about aging. It's really the whole point.
Debunking stereotypes, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, but changing aging. We age, why, I guess I'd say this, why on your 50th birthday do you get a black card with a,
You're going downhill.
Exactly. Why is that, why do we have to feel that way? There's a lot of science behind the way you perceive aging is very indicative of how you will age. And so we want to change that so people can age positively with dignity in any way they want to. This pre and post testing with community found some pretty significant changes in the way people thought. And this wasn't just, I'm going to tell you what I think when I walk in the door, and an hour and a half later I'm going to tell you what I think. There was follow-up. Did you do something differently? And we found that people did as a result of being part of this community group presentation and activities. There's activities in it too. And particularly among multicultural communities and men. That's where the most changes were, which I found interesting.
Yes.
But to the community groups, we're working on businesses and how, for instance, from the president and the CEO to the HR manager to the guy on the plant floor to everybody in between, how we think about aging at work in the business world, both from a perspective of interacting with consumers, because people may believe millennials hold all the dollars, but they do not.
Right.
And how you innovative companies are going to want to create products, services, and the like that appeal to older generation, to boomers, to people who actually need to find solutions to how they age and age well. We talked about caregiving. That would be a great example. But also how they hire.
Right.
So, I believe myself, and I think the research pans out, that an intergenerational workforce is really the workforce that creates innovation. Sitting at a table, sitting at a boardroom with people who are all like you does not generate new and great ideas. Sitting at a table with a bunch of people who all come from a different generation, a different perspective, is how we get better outcomes, more innovation, more successful companies. So working with the group, with business leaders, folks who are higher up, and the folks they bring in is another way we're disrupting aging. And then we are also moving into the classroom, because one thing that's really important is that as we're teaching kids, particular college kids, for instance, how to go into the workforce, kind of regardless of what career they're choosing, how are they interacting? How are they perceiving aging? Think about the medical field, for instance. I find this one particularly of interest, and I've experienced it a little bit. But when someone shows up who's elderly in a crisis state in an ER, and even moves into a hospital setting, right? We're dealing with the crisis. We're acting like the person in front of us. That's not their always state. That's why they're in the hospital, right?
Right.
There's a real person behind that who won't get better unless they're treated like there's someone who has a life and reasons to get out of the hospital, and looking beyond the crisis in front of you and thinking about a holistic approach to getting this person healthy and out the door. That's just an extreme example, but if you're going to go into any field, you're going to interact with people of all ages, and we want to make sure that the kids that we're sending to college to learn how to be the workforce of the future have in mind what the perceptions on aging are.
I just read, Nora, that millennials are going to be a really huge part of the workforce, and then people of my generation, many of us are deciding for whatever reason, out of choice or need, to work longer. So even our office represents 30 to 60 something. in aging. Believe it or not a lot of time left. There's so much to talk about behind the scenes at AARP. But one thing I want to hit on real quickly and briefly,
Yeah.
I know it's near and dear to you.
Near and dear to me.
And hopefully to our viewer, is Job Seeker.
Yep.
For the 50-plus worker, different climate, different tools that are needed.
I've
If
got
you
a
can
boot
very
camp.
briefly
Yeah.
just talk about that.
I myself run sort of a boot camp style. There's a couple of things you really need to know if you're a job seeker in this day and age, in particular of any age. But if you're over 50 and you maybe were in the same job for 20 plus years or so, and now you're like, wait a minute, everything's totally different.
Social
So
media,
yeah, so how social media and the internet age plays into it, networking, personal branding, and the like.
Yep.
And I think it's important to mention all of these programs, with the exception almost, I think, of the Job Seeker, are run by volunteers of ours. And
Yes.
we can have, we accept invitations. You've given out your contact information plenty of times. Invite us in if any of these things are of interest. There's more than we've even talked about here, but invite us in.
Yep.
We'll figure out a mutually beneficial time. We'll bring our skilled volunteers to your community.
Absolutely. And on that note, you mentioned the phrase before, Nora, fun with purpose.
Mostly
again,
near and dear to my heart.
Not a lot of time, but we're going to run through real quickly.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a word, and you got like 15
Okay.
seconds for each. Wine.
Okay, so we had our first AARP winery event, and it was really successful. Basically, people came out and saw us and drank wine and learned a little bit more about us, but that's all it was.
Movies for
Awesome.
grown-ups.
Movies for Grown-ups is a program out of our national office. It's premieres, before the public release, as well as some other, we rescreen some of the more popular things for people, all free.
Zoo.
The zoo. We are big fans of Connecticut's Beardsley Zoo in Bridgeport, and for I think 4 or 5 consecutive years now, we have not only a local discount that people can access anytime, but free 4th Fridays at the zoo, usually between May and September or October.
And last phrase I'm going to give you, so much more to talk about, but healthy cooking.
Healthy cooking. We like to disrupt aging and disrupt everything by turning some of the less healthy stuff that we like to eat into healthy options that are great for the multi-generations that live in your family. If you're a caregiver with a mom in the house and some teenagers in the house, what can we cook quick and fun? And usually when we have these, we have a glass of wine, make something to eat it, learn a little bit about our programs, and again, fun with purpose. And
2 other things, Nora, I'm going to give you a very short period of time because time goes so fast with all that we do. But if you can, within a minute, talk about 2 things, diversity and voter engagement.
Okay, diversity. So what we are always looking for is increasing our volunteer, particularly, base, including bilingual, Spanish bilingual, people who, I want our folks who are going into communities to be representative of the communities that are inviting them in. That really starts with our volunteers, so as well as our membership, of course, but we're always looking for multicultural volunteers, every volunteer, and that's connecting through you, but that's really important to us. And then voter engagement. We want to make sure that not only do our faces represent who the community is, we want the community to represent themselves to their electeds and to the people who are running for office of every kind. And so we give pretty clear and distinct information about AARP positions, take them to the candidates, and make sure that our membership and anybody interested knows where they stand so they can make informed decisions at the ballot.
And of course, elections happen locally every 2 years and congressionally. With your House of Representatives, every 4 years is a presidential, and emphasizing that AARP always works in a nonpartisan way. Nora, it's been great to have you as our guest. I think we need to do another show on behind the scenes. A lot happening here. Once again, if you want more information from us on any and all that we do, please feel free to contact me directly. I'm Elaine Werner, Program Specialist for Volunteer Engagement and Public Outreach. Call me, 860-548-3169. Email is ewerner, W-E-R-N-E-R, at aarp.org. Go to our website. You can find out about upcoming events, aarp.org/CT. We love coming into your community and meeting with you locally. Hopefully you found some good resources, good information, good tools that you can take away to empower your life, make choices to age with quality and dignity, and know that possibilities are available for you as you age. So thank you if you're a member of AARP. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned. We'll come and visit you again locally, and thanks.